Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are and wherever you're watching. Welcome back to the SITREP. It's our essential weekly briefing on headlines that truly matter and that directly impact your ability to stay safe and prepared. So I'm your host, and today is Saturday, December 6th, and sorry, we've got a dense docket of stories covering everything from global conflict to domestic legal upheaval, and every single one demands your attention from a preparedness standpoint. So let's get straight to the sit rep. But first, Pilot. He's asleep. Not a care in the world. It's awesome. So, first, we're going to talk about geopolitical tensions. Um, so we're going to tackle the escalating rhetoric and strategy regarding the Indo-Pacific. Reports indicate that President Donald Trump has unveiled a strategy aimed at deterring conflict with China over Taiwan and the South China Sea. As we can see from this article here, it says exactly that there on Ground News. Now, while the political discussions focus on diplomacy and military posturing, our concern here is the economic fallout of any misstep, which is always a concern. A conflict in this region isn't just a military engagement, it's a global economic disaster. This area is the central nervous system for global manufacturing and shipping. And if conflict erupts, it is not an overstatement to say that the supply chain issues we saw during the pandemic would look like a minor inconvenience. We're talking about the immediate cessation of flow for nearly every electronic component, medical supply device, and manufactured goods that you rely on. So, what is our preparedness action plan here? Well, make sure that deep inventory is non negotiable. This threat reinforces that we need a deep 6 to 12 month inventory of non perishable foods. Make sure you have critical spare parts for home systems like we've talked like before, things for your furnace and pump, well pump that is, and etc. And also have a sufficient stock of essential medications if need be. We also need to embrace low tech, become less reliant on hyper specialized electronics. I don't know how many of you can, I can, but can you navigate with a paper map if you didn't have Google Maps? Do you have an analog radio? And can you perform basic repairs without ordering a new circuit board or looking it up on YouTube? Resilience is found in simplicity. We're also should be investing in some cash because banks and digital transactions should be heavily impacted by international economic sanctions or even cyber retaliation. So ensure that you have a substantial amount of emergency cash stored securely. And so this really all started from the article here you see on screen. Let me hide this thing on up here. There we go. And basically, it's on Friday, so yesterday. The White House released a huge, detailed plan concerning Taiwan. And basically, it focuses on basically working with our allies to shoulder more of defense spending and operational access. In particular, Japan and South Korea. You know, unfortunately, in the past, we've seen where we've done things like this before in different countries, and unfortunately, we've shouldered a majority of the risk and a majority of the cost and a majority of all else. And then when it fails, Afghanistan, we have been the ones to pay the price, unfortunately. And so, with that being said, I'm glad to see that he is trying to get them involved. And it does look like bipartisan support is happening for Taiwan, which is good. Um, Excuse me. So that's pretty good. And in this article, yeah, it does have a pretty good selection. I'm not sure why this would be a left-leaning article, but it is, I guess. Uh, and so we do get a lot of good things here. Oh, interesting. Most of it is media conglomerates and wealthy private owners. No independent sources here. So that's very interesting. Um, so yeah, their left-leaning sources cite unveil Trump's action to unveil strategy or prevent conflict, where right-leaning outlets are interesting. All right. Sorry, side note there. So, the other thing that the next story, really, that I wanted to talk about here this morning is public health and vaccinations. Yes, our favorite topic in the last few years. So, this one touches on public health and the infrastructure that keeps us from disease, or at least they claim that. President Trump has ordered a review of why the U.S. childhood vaccination schedule includes more shots than in many peer countries. So this should be no surprise for most of you guys, right? I'm not, anti-vaccination, but we should be taking a look at this and getting a good idea of what is actually happening and why we're doing it. I think that's smart, to be honest. But regardless of the political outcome of this review, the very act of questioning the vaccination schedule could have a dangerous side effect: the erosion of public trust in established public health systems. Right. Um, got it. That was lost during COVID. So no problem there. We already lost trust in it, and that's pretty obvious. So here we know that when public health fails, though, in terms of, FEMA, disaster relief, that kind of stuff, a local and community level emergencies can follow. A drop in vaccination rates for common diseases, even preventable ones like measles or mumps, can quickly lead to localized outbreaks, overwhelming clinics, and tying up emergency services that should be focused on other disasters. But but we can also just practice basic safety and health guidelines that just keep us, from getting those things. Um, Vaccinations for everything all the time, boosters everywhere isn't necessarily the problem. So, or the solution rather. So, for us in our action plan in this case, for this schedule issue, let's actually talk about this article first. Um, so, they basically just President Trump just came out and said that they wanted a review of the childhood vaccine recommendations. Because they did, it looks like, recently remove the hepatitis B shots for all newborns on the schedules, which is very interesting, right? Um, and he signed a memo aiming to align domestic immunization guidelines with those of developed nations. So it appears that the schedule did have 72 shots on it before, but it appears that our schedule for some reason was insanely a lot larger than even uh, country nations that are similar to us, call it Canada, England, those kind of things. And so, um, for us, what should we do right now because of this? So we do need to make sure our family health records are accurate, and not just for vaccine, schedules and stuff like that. We can't rely on public systems that could become overburdened or compromised. We need to ensure that every member of your household has up to date documentation for all of their health histories. And it should go with this one as well as what we talked about in the last article, that we do need to stockpile common medical supplies with just about anything else right now. We need to build out your extended home medical kit, and we'll be talking about that in a video coming up in a few weeks to a month or so. But beyond the standard first aid kit, we need to stock up on things like fever reducers, like Tylenol, electrolyte mixes, Pedialyte, but preferably the powdered versions because it keeps longer, cold and flu relief, and things like rubbing alcohol and sterile bandages. Because honestly, those are the first items that are going to disappear with a widespread health scare. I mean, look at toilet paper. We also need to develop a plan for safely isolating a family member who becomes really sick without having to spread it to the rest of the household. This could include things like a dedicated room assignment, separate ventilation, proper sanitation protocols, etc. So we need to make sure to take care of our health for everybody in our family and our community, and not rely on the government to do that. And that's pretty much the definition for everything we do here on this channel. Excuse me. So, the next story, switching back to the global stage, we see that continuing geopolitical posturing. Now, the system, which is an article or a news outlet here, has reported that the Kremlin republished an older document concerning President Putin just before a recent high-level meeting. And this is a classic international form of signaling, basically. Um, and with that, political observers view this as a form of signaling as well. But for us, it is definitely a reminder that tensions remain dangerously high. Heightened political heightened geopolitical antagonism frequently manifests in one of two ways that directly impact your home. Cyber attacks targeting infrastructure and energy price volatility. And Russia has demonstrated capabilities to target energy and utility grids. So while you can't stop a state sponsored hacker in your home, you can sure as heck prepare for the fallout when the lights go out. And so in this article here, basically, Kremlin advisor says Putin and U.S. envoy Wickoff understand each other. Now, this is huge, I think, right? There are a bunch of people reporting this. Oh, there's only 8 still. It's a good number. But this is actually interesting because this is signaling hope from Russia. And right now, we really need to be getting along with Russia and I mean, not in a sense of giving up our morals or anything, but we're trying to get them to stop the war in Ukraine. And if we can understand each other better, we can come to a better peace agreement and get them to stop attacking Ukraine. It's that simple. And so if there's signs that we're actually being able to work with each other and talk with each other more effectively, then that is a great sign for the future and for maybe a peace deal. I mean, we've already seen it in other places around the world with President Trump, and so that's pretty huge. I'm super happy about that. So let's see here. The other thing, so let's talk about this story. If you've never seen the live stream, welcome, first of all. But the other thing that we use here is Ground News. And so Ground News is this website that I get all of my news on. It is not supported by media conglomerates, anything like that. People want you to see certain stories, nothing. It is purely independent, and they evaluate each news story and put them together. For example, this is a good way. It's a really good way to determine if it's a biased news story, and they also provide you kind of a good center ground on a lot of these news stories. For example, on this story here, you can see there's left, right, center. There's not a whole lot to select from, so it doesn't give you a good selection on all those 3. But you can see, hey, up here on the right, there's 8 news stories. And you could see that it's actually a fairly central leaning story already. When it says all these different news stories. And if you wanted to, you could click on these news stories and it would take you to their news story exactly. It'll also give you a factuality score, based on the historical factuality of the previous of those websites, as well as the ownership spread of the news stories reporting this. It's a pretty cool website. I highly recommend it. And then I do have this for you about them. That is not the right button.
The news is divided. Ground News puts it back together, so you can see how many sources are reporting on any breaking story, where they fall on the political spectrum, how reliable they are, and who owns them. Compare headlines and read full articles to see which details are prioritized, exaggerated, or left out entirely. Because the more we understand the media, the more we'll understand each other.
All right. Well, so we're super thankful for Ground News, and you can check the link in the description or comments below on your respective platform. But to talk about this story here real quick, I really want to, every story we talk about, we give a basic action plan and things that you can think of, especially in terms of a prepper mindset, things that you want to remember and do. And in this case, from this, we definitely want to make sure we secure some backup power. If you don't have a reliable alternative to grid power, then you are vulnerable. You need to invest in a quality generator, solar setup, or a battery backup system to keep communication and essential heat and refrigeration running. For fuel security, you need to ensure that you have enough stabilized fuel or heating for heating systems, and that you're following all safety protocols for long-term storage. If you're not familiar with how to store fuel, make sure you look it up. Don't just put gasoline in large vats in your garage. In terms of digital independence, just like the China story before, make sure you have physical paper backups of all of your critical information, passwords, contacts, banking details, etc. Because you got to assume that in a high stakes cyber event like one that could happen with Russia, the internet and local networks could become unreliable for sure. So, just some things to keep in mind. Alrighty. So, on a related note, so the US has cited progress in talks with Ukrainian officials, which is setting up the stage for further diplomatic engagements. The conflict in Ukraine remains an active, destabilizing factor in the global ecosystem. So if we check out this article here, we can see it basically talking about the ongoing conflict that continues to exert pressure on global food and energy supplies, and it's creating inflation and driving volatility in commodity prices. It's a slow moving emergency, but one that drains your financial reserves and makes it harder to secure essential prepping supplies. Here in this article, it basically talks about Ukrainian negotiators that have arrived in Miami, and they've sat with Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner, like the last article, Steve Witkoff. And they're going to meet, or they met rather, yesterday, and said that another meeting is expected today, so that's good. Revisions by Ukraine, Europe, and the US produced a new version of a plan that Moscow appeared to reject at a December 2nd meeting. So basically, they're working on this peace plan that Russia didn't like. Because Ukraine had submitted a peace plan that US liked, and they, I guess, gave it to Russia, and they did not like it. So, yeah, it looks like they tried to give it on December 2nd. They had more meetings on December 4th with Russia's people. Didn't go so well. And as you can see here, this is an interesting number. I've never seen this before listed, but that they claim 19.2% of Ukraine is controlled by Russia. Super, super interesting. So, yeah, that's actually a pretty good summary. But if you've seen on the news, Ukraine's ready to end this. They're not ready. They don't want to do this anymore. They don't they don't want to be at war. They've lost too many people, lost too much land. Whether they're ready to give up land, to end it, that's a great question. You know, um, but something they have to think about for their own, future. And for our future here, we need to think about financial shock absorbers, which is, the best preparedness plan includes a financial component. If you can, you need to build a small emergency fund that's separate from your savings, like a prep fund, so to speak, that's dedicated to riding out economic shocks or making critical purchases when prices spike. So we need to make sure to hedge against inflation. When buying preps, focus on tangible goods that will hold value and are essential, like precious metals and long term food storage. So buying in bulk now is a hedge against future price increases. We also really need to think about this in terms of our food preservation skills. The ultimate hedge against global food price volatility is self sufficiency. So we need to learn skills like canning, dehydrating, and gardening. When the global markets shake, a well stocked pantry and a garden can offer incredible stability. Excuse me. All right. One second. Oh, man. Okay. Now for a couple stories that are going to focus on domestic legal and social flashpoints. So the Supreme Court has agreed to decide on a major constitutional issue. So whether the president may end birthright citizenship. So we'll pause right there. If you guys are not familiar with birthright citizenship, it may just be something innate that you believe, right? It means if you were born here on United States soil, no matter who you are, where you come from, what country you may be from, you get citizenship, and so, right, that makes sense. If your parents are American, you know sisters are American, and then you're born, you are American. It's pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory, I think. The problem comes in when and this is why this is a huge deal, is with illegal immigration. When illegal immigrants decide to make their way over here to the US and living in here in the US and they have a child, that child, because of this birthright citizenship, now becomes a citizen, even though their parents came here illegally. This that kind of behavior is not super common around the world, especially if they're committing a crime to come here. So that's it's a very interesting topic for sure. But regardless of your stance on the issue, a Supreme Court decision of this magnitude, essentially on a topic that divides the country so deeply, really has the high potential to trigger widespread, sustained civil unrest and mass protests. I mean, just look at ICE raids, point case in point. In an emergency, our goal is to avoid areas of civil unrest and ensure safety and prevent getting caught in a volatile situation. As so from this article, we can definitely see that they've agreed to basically it's surrounding a executive order that limits birthright citizenship, and they're likely gonna it's not gonna happen right away, but they're gonna find out and they're gonna research it and they're gonna maybe decide by the end of June. We'll see. Um, so it it basically says that only people who bear, like, this uses the term bear allegiance, right, to the U.S. will get birthright citizenship. So your mom, me and my wife are Americans. We have a kid. We both bear allegiance to the U.S. So kid is American, right? If we come here, if me and my wife had come here illegally and we had a kid, no, we don't bear allegiance to the U.S. because we're here illegally, and so that kid wouldn't be um, a citizen. I kind of like that idea. I kind of think that's good. I think that's fair, right? You want to become citizens? Great. Then your kids can become citizens too. But don't expect to have your kid be a citizen just because you come here while you're pregnant and you're born and, I don't know. To me that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But so this is definitely a contested issue though. And so I'll be interested to see how this goes in the future. Likely we won't see anything until June or so. But, in terms of, for our plan, what does this mean to us and what we do on a daily basis? Really, because we're talking about civil unrest, so you have to update your communication plans. During mass events, cell phone networks can be intentionally or unintentionally overloaded. Sorry, one second. Sorry, man. Okay. So we need to establish a clear time-based communication plan, like meet at location X at 7 p.m. if we get separated, or, things that don't rely on cell phone service. I also highly recommend, if you watch before or at other times, that you have um, things like mesh-tastic radios, which I have videos for on this channel on YouTube, that talk about how you can have grid communications even if the grid goes down and cell phones go down. And that's something we check regularly on a routine basis. We also need to make sure to pre-scout routes and avoidance. So I basically that means identify and pre-map alternate routes to work, school, home, and stuff like that that steer clear of likely protest areas like Capitol buildings, courts, central squares, things like that. You also need to do a home security audit and review your home security protocols. Ensure that your doors and windows are secure. Consider having non lethal defense tools and knowledge of their proper use. Uh, Have lethal ones too if you need it, but I'm not a lawyer and I'm not giving you legal advice about that. I just know I would protect myself no matter what if it came to someone hurting me or my family. And remember, the goal is always to avoid confrontation if possible. All right. So, we need to just be careful, be aware, watch news, and listen to, the SITREP here so we can get an idea of what's going on and, be prepared when things do happen. So, finally, get this new dog up here. A Florida judge has ordered the release of Jeffrey Epstein related grand jury records. Yes, we had to talk about Epstein. Sorry, that's just going to happen. So, this is a story that will likely dominate the news cycle for weeks and drawing immense public attention and controversy. Um, oh, sorry, got a message from someone. But basically, Well, this is a critical story for transparency and justice for the prepper. It's a massive, massive distraction. When the public and the media are hyper focused on a sensationalized drama domestically, critical vulnerabilities like those in your cyber and energy infrastructure can be ignored. Public trust in institutions will also take another significant hit. So in this story here, we see, yeah, Epstein, right? Huge deal. A lot of news sources on this one. Thankfully, it's very center related. So, a federal judge has released the grand jury transcripts from the federal sex trafficking case of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. So, this is big, right? It's basically what everyone said. That surprises me that they've still been sealed this whole time, to be honest. And, but sorry, they haven't been released yet. They've 1 month. The Justice Department has 1 month. Um, but the other thing too is that President Trump is directing that the Justice Department investigate this. They're not yet published, but they said that Congress could try and hold the Justice Department in contempt of Congress if they don't. But that would mean the DOJ would have to file charges against itself. So it's highly not likely, but it is possible. And I think it's something that, honestly, I'm not surprised by anything from this administration anymore. So the I don't know what the big deal is. Like, I think if people that are on the other side of like, why is everyone so upset about this? Why it's just Epstein files? Like, let's okay. So just bear with me for a second, right? If they just released all these files, none of it has any sort of secrets in it or anything, right? It's just a case against this guy who's trafficked people for sex. Then release all the documents, right? Get everything out there. Then it wouldn't be such a big deal. The only reason that people are going crazy about this because they think that something is being hidden is because the documents are not being released. I don't understand. It blows my mind. Blows my mind. And so that's why I think we need to, you know, why it needs to be a bigger deal and why we need to look at it. Because they're not releasing it. So if they do release the documents, cool. We'll take a look. I think everyone will calm down. I think people need to realize that if they just released all the documents, people would calm down. It wouldn't be an issue anymore, and we'd move on. Plain and simple. So things that this needs to, you know, give us, right? What do we need to look into this as preppers, homesteaders, that kind of stuff? So we need to use the 2-week period when this news story is consuming the news cycle to conduct your most vital prep tasks. So we need to make sure your generator's serviced. Take that first aid course, quietly secure that extra fuel or long-term food supply, things like that. The less attention that are on your actions, the better. We need to reinforce community ties. A breakdown in trust in government and institutions places a greater burden on the local community. We need to use this time to build bridges with your immediate neighbors and coordinate with local watch or mutual aid groups. Trust starts at your doorstep. So, but that, really wraps up our December 6th edition of the SITREP here this morning on Saturday. There are 6 seemingly disparate news stories, but they're all leading to one undeniable conclusion, is that the world is becoming more volatile and preparedness is not an option. It is a necessity. So make sure to take these headlines, go on Ground News, and click the link below for that if you need a subscription. Turn them into your task list. And remember, being ready for the worst is the best way to ensure the best possible outcome. So make sure, join us every Saturday. We do this every Saturday morning for the most part. We probably won't be here next weekend because we do have a soccer tournament, but we may do it on a different day just to make sure it gets covered. But join us next Saturday for a deep dive into a lot of these different issues. And one thing we're definitely going to talk about is, and at least for the high desert for sure, is water independence. It's just a very critical element of survival. So make sure we do not have the video preview this week because it has been kind of a busy week, to be honest. So, but it is on, I'll tell you, The Gray Man. So if you've never heard about that, no, we're not talking about aliens. We're talking about hiding in plain sight and things you can practically think about and do. It's a fairly short video, but things you can practically do to hide in plain sight and not advertise yourself as a prepper. So that comes out tomorrow at noon. We're doing now noon o'clock tomorrow on the Pacific Coast. So until then, make sure to stay safe, stay vigilant, stay prepared. And so I am your host, and this has been the SITREP. We'll see you next time.